Hey friends, my name is Bond, this is Oleg, and in today's video we're going to do a review of a German watch. I have a feeling that this review might be longer than usual, so I broke it down into sections. Each section is going to be linked in the description below, so you can skip around if you wish to. I think the best way to start this review is to talk about Nomos as a brand. But I'm not going to talk about it in nitty-gritty details. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. When was their first in-house movement? When was their first automatic movement? If you really care about that information, you can just Google it yourself. In this video, I'm going to talk about Nomos brand in general and kind of give you my thoughts and what at first didn't attract me to the brand and now really does attract me to this brand. Nomos started making watches about 30 years ago, which isn't very long in the watchmaking terms. However, they did establish somewhat of a reputation for them because of that Bauhaus design, which we will talk about a little bit later in this video. Nomos never really broke out. They don't have any standout models. They don't have anything that people are lusting over. They've always been flying sort of under the radar. For example, myself personally, before I got this watch, all I knew about Nomos is that they make dress watches, they're German, and people seem to like them. That's about it. That's all I knew about Nomos. I didn't know any specific models. I didn't know about their in-house movements. None of that. So I think that is the problem with Nomos watches. Even watch enthusiasts don't really know much about this brand. But I think the problem goes deeper, and I think I figured out why this problem exists. And it's because Nomos doesn't make any sports models. Think about it. Think about AP, one of the biggest, most popular watch manufacturers. Outside of their sports models, how many other models can you name? And the same goes for Rolex. Outside of their sports models, they also make dress watches. Do you know anyone who owns a Rolex dress watch? Chances are not many people, because dress watches just aren't as popular as sports watches. And when I was considering which watch to buy, I wanted to buy a German watch. I never had a German watch in my collection, so I really wanted to add one. I was looking at Sin, I was looking at Laco, I was looking at Stova. All of them offer Flieger models, which I really like. And Flieger watches are, of course, a type of a sports watch, as opposed to what Nomos makes, which are more of a dressier, casual watches. That was part of the reason why I decided to go for Nomos, because I myself don't have many dress watches in my collection. I don't really have a need to wear dress watches on a daily basis. I don't wear suits all that often. I don't go to any black tie events, especially in the past year. But I thought, hey, what the hell? I probably need a pretty good dress watch, and comparing Nomos designs to everything else, I felt like Nomos really did stand out from the field of dress watches. And I wanted to really do more research about it and find out more information about this company, find out more information about these watches. And once I started digging deeper, I was like, yeah, no question. I have to get a Nomos, at least to experience it. Maybe it will stay in my collection, maybe it won't, but I really wanted to experience it. And oh boy, am I glad that I went that route. So as I mentioned, the design of this watch, it's very unique, it's very German, and comparing to other dress watches, it's very interesting and dynamic, so to speak. If you look at a lot of traditional dress watches, they're kind of boring. I mean, some of them come in precious metals like a gold or rose gold. They all have a very similar design aesthetic. They all have very similar design cues. You pretty much know what you're buying with a dress watch. And I personally always went for vintage dress watches. I think there's just something a little bit more classy about them. They don't really have to be tough and rugged because you're wearing them with a suit, so that doesn't matter. And having a classy vintage dress watch always felt a little bit more badass than to buy a brand new one. However, when I started looking at Nomos watches and their designs, they really stood out from other dress watches, because looking at the dial, it doesn't feel like your standard dress watch. It feels traditional with its design because of that Bauhaus design language, but at the same time, it feels very modern because it doesn't look like your traditional old school dress watch. And that's what really attracted me to these watches, because if you look at them as a dress watch, they really stand out, they're really cool, and to me they look really hip. When I wear this watch, I want to take a vintage camera and go take photos in a jean jacket or something like that. I don't know. It makes me feel very cool and stylish when I wear this watch, even though it is pretty simple, pretty basic in its design. It's not overly flashy, but it's just really cool and really timeless design. So the case itself, pretty flat except for this step portion on the sides. That's about it. Very round, very boring looking, except for the lugs. The lugs really protrude out of the case. And then you have a crown at the 3 o'clock position. Those are the design elements of this case. The lugs also have drill block holes. But other than that, yeah, that's it. It's all done in high polish. There are no contrasting finishes. What you see is what you get. Okay, so the design of this case is a little boring, I'm gonna admit that. However, the rest of it is not boring even one bit. First of all, this dial. It's a galvanized white silver plated dial, and the way it plays with the light, it's amazing. The longer I collect watches, the more I start to appreciate dials and dial designs. At first, I didn't really care about dials. Dial is a dial, whatever. But the more watches I experience, the more I can understand the difference between a great quality dial and an average dial. And this one here, it's a great quality dial. The printing is super sharp. The design is very minimalistic, yet not boring. You have that sub dial for the seconds hand by the 6 o'clock position, concentric circles, simple markings, and look at this handset. At the first glance, pretty boring, simple stuff. However, the handset is actually blued tempered steel. In the right lighting condition, they sparkle, they shine, they give a beautiful blue hue. I just love that little pop of color on this otherwise very monotone dial. It is wrong of me to describe this dial as monotone because it is anything but. Yes, in certain light conditions, it looks kind of monotoned. However, in other lighting conditions, it kind of mimics its environment. So sometimes it looks salmon pink, sometimes it gives a blue hue, sometimes it looks silver, sometimes it looks white. It's a very chameleon-like dial, and that's one of my favorite elements of this watch. So what about the size? Dress watches are supposed to be smaller, and Nomos has thought of that also. It offers this watch in 2 different sizes, 35 and 38 millimeters. Now, hearing that, you might think, whoa, that's way too small for me. I need at least a 40 millimeter dress watch because I have these massive wrists or I have preference for bigger watches. Well, I'm happy to say that this 38 actually wears like a 40, maybe even 41, because it's all dial. There's pretty much no bezel, so the appearance of the watch on the wrist is much larger, and even with the 38 millimeter diameter, it has nice wrist presence. It's not too thick, only 8.6 millimeters in thickness, including that sapphire crystal. It's a flat sapphire crystal with no protrusion, so it looks great. It slips under the cuff of pretty much any dress shirt. It also has your standard 20 millimeter lug width, so choosing straps for this watch would be super easy. I would say if you have a wrist under 6.5, 6 inches, go for the smaller version, go for the 35 millimeter version. If you have a wrist size over 6.5, 7 inches, then probably go for this larger 38 millimeter version. Either version you choose, it fits great. It fits like a modern dress watch that looks very traditional. And that's what I'm gonna keep on repeating in this video. It's a very traditional / modern dress watch. This watch offers a lot of dichotomy. That's why it was so difficult to film this review. This is actually the second time I'm filming this review because I have so much to say about this watch, and a lot of it makes no sense unless you actually experience the watch or unless you watch this video in entirety. As far as the comfort on the wrist goes, this is a perfect dress watch because you pretty much don't feel anything on your wrist. If you have a comfortable strap, right now I have this watch on a pretty cheap leather strap, but if you buy a nice strap for it, it will not feel like anything on your wrist. And even on this cheaper strap, it still feels super comfortable, weighing only 56 grams. When I did an unboxing video for this watch, I talked about the other 2 German watches that I was considering. I was considering Stova and I was considering Laco. Now one of the reasons why I chose this watch over the other 2, because this Nomos is a true German watch with a German in-house movement. As opposed to the other 2, they're using Swiss movements. Nothing wrong with that, but to me didn't feel as German as this watch. So this movement, is it just German movement, or is it a great movement that just happens to be German? I think it's the combination of two. It's a German movement and it is fantastic. So first of all, the appearance of this movement. The minute you flip over that case back, you're greeted with something so pleasurable, so beautiful to look at. You have that Glashutte striping, you have your pelage work, you have your sunburst effects, you have your steel blued screws that play with the light, you see the balance wheel ticking. It's just an amazing movement to look at. And I did a video not that long ago talking about a fake Rolex Submariner that I reviewed and how the buyer of that watch got tricked and how I got tricked into reviewing this watch. Well, let me tell you this. Looking at this movement, it would be very, very difficult and expensive to fake. A movement like this is pretty much fake proof, because to fake this movement would be so expensive that it's not worth faking. And these are the type of watches that offer fantastic value for money, where the original is such a good deal that faking it doesn't make sense. This is an in-house caliber DUW5001. It is of course an automatic movement, which is super impressive because the watch is very thin and they were still able to fit a rotor in there. They did some cutouts in the rotor so the movement is more exposed. Really nice attention to detail. It has 26 joules, 43 hours of power reserve, and it beats at 21,600 vibrations per hour. From my experience, very, very accurate movement. I'm getting within 3 seconds per day. This is my first time experiencing a Nomos movement, and there are 3 things that I noticed that are slightly different from other movements that I've experienced so far. The first thing is this rotor. It's not the easiest rotor to turn. It's not like your Miyota rotor where you just push it and it spins forever. This one takes some effort to move. It's not as free spinning as some of the other automatic movements that I've experienced. It is also a little noisy. That's the rotor noise. Not very refined, especially comparing to all the other parts of this watch. It kind of shows its affordability, so to speak, because I mean, everything cannot be perfect for the price of this watch. Something has to give, and unfortunately is the rotor noise that gives. I'm happy to say on the wrist, you don't hear it, you don't feel it, but if you're just holding it in your hand and you're spinning, playing with the movement, you can definitely hear that rotor noise as it kind of bounces up and down. The other 2 things that I noticed, there is no clutch slip system. I don't know what to call it, but let me explain. Basically, in other automatic movements, when you wind the watch, because this watch does offer hand winding, when you're winding the crown, there is a definite stop. In other Swiss automatic movements, you can wind the crown indefinitely. It's not going to damage the movement. There is this slip system where when you wind the spring enough, it just slips the crown so you can wind it and wind it and wind it and nothing happens to the movement. This movement has a definite stop. So once you reach that stop, you have to be very careful not to overwind it. You have to be kind of in tune with the watch so you don't overwind it, otherwise you can really damage your watch. And the third quirk, if you will, of this movement that I noticed is that when the movement stopped, when it ran out of juice, the minute you wind the crown even 1 turn, it goes right away. There's no lag, there's no delay. Other movements, you have to sometimes go 10, 20 turns until the seconds hand starts ticking. This one, it's instant. The minute you turn the crown, the movement starts ticking. The last thing I want to talk about is the value of these watches. It is very difficult to beat, especially for used examples. So I bought this watch used on eBay. I paid $12.50 for it US, plus some import taxes, so I guess it worked out to be about $14.50, plus I still need to buy a strap for it, so let's say $1,500 all in. For $1,500, I got an amazing watch. In-house movement, silver-plated dial, steel blued hands, a decorated movement, super accurate, sapphire sandwich, and that Bauhaus design from a company that is known for their Bauhaus designs. I mean, that's very difficult to beat. There's a handful of other manufacturers, maybe Seiko comes to mind, that offers as much value as this watch here. And if Nomos offered sports model, which I hope they do in the future, I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. Because they only offer their dress watches, they're not as popular as they could be, but if you are in the market for a dress watch, I can't recommend Nomos enough. I will say this, if you have a choice between a good used example and a brand new example, I would go for the used example because they drop in value so much after you buy them. I would go a used watch route, and I would also only look at watches with the display case back. It costs a little bit more, but you have to do it. This movement is too beautiful to hide. I don't even know why they still offer solid steel casebacks. Who's choosing that? That should be a crime. So that's it, that's the review. I appreciate you watching it until the end. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, we release new videos, I want to say every week, hopefully every week from now on. And leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about this Nomos watch and what you think about Nomos watches in general. I always enjoy reading your comments. By the way, today on my wrist, I'm wearing my Casio Beside. I did a full review of this watch. Well, not this watch specifically. I did a review of a brown version of this watch. That video can be found on the YouTube channel. I will also leave it linked in the description below. Also in the description below, there are a couple of other links. The first link is a link to blondnativestraps.com. The second link is a secret link. Have a look if you're curious. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked it. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye. You did so well.